Ladies and gentlemen, it's 4:05. I would like to begin today's meeting. Ms. Fano, I'd like to call to order. Ms. Fano, would you lead us today in the Pledge of Allegiance? Vice Chair Fano. Thank you. Ms. Secretary, can you do a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Edmondson, Mayor Jimenez, Ms. Gutierrez, Mr. Meyer,
Present.
Mr. Walters, Treasurer Board, Secretary Wolf, Vice Chair Fano, Chair Martinez.
Here. Do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
Very good. Item C, the approval of the agenda. Does any board member or staff wish to amend the agenda in any way? Mr. Director, first to you.
Sir, the agenda is fine as it is.
Does anyone have any objection? So move to set the agenda. Any objections? Seconded by Mr. Walters. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Moving on. Council, please. Item D.
Declaration of voting conflicts. Do any members of this board have to report any conflicts with any items on the agenda? Seeing none, we move forward.
Very good. Thank you. Citizens' comments. Does anyone from the audience today wish to have any comments on any matter that deals with transportation or is before this board today? Council, has anyone indicated that they wish to speak to the board today?
No, sir.
Hearing none, we'll move on.
No, Mr. Chair, please make them say hello to us as we say hello to them.
You know, in the honor, in the immortal words of one of my mentors in this place, Ms. Gutierrez, I'd ask all of the audience, as we will say to you, good afternoon or hello. Hello. I know it's late and it's hot. Let's try that again. Hello. Hello. Thank you all for taking time out of your very busy schedules to be with us here today. It is a very, very warm day outside, and we appreciate your effort in being here. Thank you all. Approval of the minutes. Anyone wish to move those? Moved by Ms. Gutierrez, seconded by Vice Chair Fano. It's open for discussion. Any amendments to the minutes? Discussion is closed. All in favor say aye. 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 Any opposed? Hearing none, item passes. The Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to the board members. Thank you for being here. In my report today, I'm going to address a few items. The first one is an obvious issue. It's House Bill 1049. I want to thank all the board members who gave us the opportunity to brief you on the impacts or issues contained in the bill. As we discussed, and I know that General Counsel Saldivar is going to address this further in his report, but as far as the bill goes, I broke the bill down into two categories. The category of good governance, which is, doing an audit biannually. We do it every year. Containing our administrative costs to below 10% of the average, putting all of our expenditure data, and then all the other disclosures on the website are all things that we're going to do regardless of what action the governor takes. There's a separate set of issues that are contained in the bill that I classify as governance, policy setting, or autonomy setting components, such as that anything that we do to adjust our toll rates has to have a traffic and revenue study, which we do, except for CPI. That the board, that all changes to rates need a 2/3 vote, that there needs to be 5 miles between gantries, that there needs to be a reduction of toll rates, or to set aside 20 to 50% of our surplus. I classify all of those as governance, policy setting, and autonomy issues. That if you read the bill, it says that if any of those items are in conflict with our existing bond documents or our transfer agreement, pretty much it gives us relief. And I'll let the attorneys get more into that at the appropriate time during their report. But right now, the bill was passed in both chambers. It is pending transmittal to the governor's office. It still hasn't gotten there, and then the governor has 14 plus 1 days to take action one way or the other. The bill also includes items on managed lanes. It doesn't affect MDX. It affects mostly the Florida Department of Transportation, Florida Turnpike Enterprise. As far as the status of our construction projects on 836, I want to report that 836-28, which is the reconstruction between 57th Avenue and 17th Avenue, is 60% complete. It is scheduled for completion in the summer of 2018. The reason I bring this up today is because there's going to be some major maintenance of traffic and ramp closures in the summertime. And what I'd like to alert everyone who's listening or watching is to please check our website on the traffic advisories, or contact our PIO, Yvette Holt, at 305-335-0924, or on our website. And there will be some impacts to certain ramps. We're going to try to minimize them as much as we can and limit it to the summertime when schools are out. And that's typically how we've done it. Most of the construction on 836 has been occurring at nighttime with little to no disruption to the flow of traffic in the community. But I wanted to make that announcement because it's getting close to the summer, and there's going to be some impacts at ramps. On 836-29, which is the interchange at 87th Avenue, we're 40% complete. We've seen a lot of progress. A lot of the work is happening outside of the traffic lanes. We've been coordinating with the city of Doral and with the elected officials in the area to inform them of the progress of that project. On 874-10, which is the extension of 874 over the Turnpike out to 128th Street and to the Miami Airport, the bridges over the Turnpike are 80% complete. That work is being done by Florida's Turnpike. We did an interlocal agreement with the Turnpike. They actually are constructing it. That's 80% complete. We just began the work on Southwest 128th Street, where we're going to be widening it on behalf of the county from 137th Avenue to 122nd Avenue. No major issues on that. As far as PD&E projects, the one project I did want to update you on is the 836-18, which is the extension of 836. The project has been progressing very well, and we're getting a lot of community support. There's obvious concerns in the environmental and no-growth communities. We will continue to work with all of these community groups. We're coordinating currently with Miami-Dade County's RER department, right? Because this project is to be considered in the upcoming cycle of the comp plan amendments. And we want to make sure that whatever is planned, built, and approved makes sense in the bigger context of the Comprehensive Development Master Plan for Miami-Dade County. Our goal, as it always has been, is to try to get a project that is permittable and acceptable to all factions of the community. We know there's going to be impacts, and we'll have to mitigate for them, but we want to make sure that we can go through a process that is transparent. The actual resolution for consideration into this cycle of the comp plan is now has been moved to the June 13th Government Operations Committee. So we'll make sure that we're there represented, and I know there's going to be a lot of community folks there. As far as the TPO, Transportation Planning Organization, and Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I'll address that as well, since we don't have a representative yet. At the last TPO meeting, 2 of our projects were included as priority 1 in the long-range transportation plan for inclusion into the current 5-year TIP. The 2 projects were the State Road 112, 37th Avenue ramps. That was part of our strategic master plan. And the second one was the Gratigny ramps at 67th Avenue. Both of them were adopted and are part of our 5-year plan now. As far as our 5-year plan, the TPO has asked all transportation agencies to be present at their June 5th TPO Fiscal Priorities Committee to make a very brief, no more than 3-slide presentation on the highlights of our 5-year TIP for their approval in their June board meeting. So that's the next major step in approval of the work program. As a reminder, the budget workshop was moved from June 7th to June 27th. Everyone will be receiving a memo with an outline. It's very detailed. I think with the help of Treasurer Board, I think you're going to see a little bit different presentation this year as it relates to the budget and the finances of the authority. So stay tuned, right? And then the last thing I'd like to let the board know, and it didn't dawn on me to let everyone know because it's always on the consent agenda. I've always been a big proponent of gathering information in our industry. IBTTA, which is the International Bridge, Tunnel, and Turnpike Association, in association with the Transportation Research Board, is going to have their first joint meeting that they've ever held, and it's going to be on managed lanes, congestion pricing, and all electronic tolling, July 14th through 18th in Dallas, Texas. The significance and why I bring it up to you is because there's no secret that the current federal administration is looking at tolling and congestion pricing as a potential for funding the upcoming transportation bill. Whether it pans out, my position has always been, I don't believe that it is appropriate to toll every interstate in the United States. I don't believe that every project is a candidate for tolling. I believe that every state should have the ability to evaluate it and make decisions at the local level. And I think that's the position of IBTTA. Everywhere that there has been the ability to use user financing as a tool has proven to be very good in delivering a project. So I invite the board members who can attend to attend. There's a heck of a lot of knowledge and a lot of experts there that you can speak to, and that will conclude my report.
Thank you, Mr. Director. First, going out to the board, does the board have any questions for Mr. Rodriguez? Mr. Mayor, and good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Executive Director, you talked about some disruptions during the summer.
Yes.
Do we have signs that are not on the expressway itself that if you have, I know you told me about a disruption on 42nd Avenue.
Yes.
Will we have signs on 42nd Avenue saying this particular ramp will not be used from such, from such
We've
such
actually
spaces?
had those signs out for a number of weeks.
Okay.
Out into the community itself, not just on the expressway. We try to capture the art of a good maintenance of traffic plan is to catch them before they get to the point of closure. So we're trying to get them informed. The question is, how many will read it and how much will still get stuck when they get to the point? But again, that's why I made the announcement that please be alert. This is happening. It's going to happen in the summertime.
Yeah, but those that are actually using the road, or, they don't have to go on the website or wherever. Those are the ones that are using the road are going to say, hey, okay, I understand now. That's going to be closed, so they can make an adjustment before it happens.
Yes.
Any other questions, Mr. Mayor, any other question on his report, Mr. Mayor? Or is that all you had to ask?
For now, yes, that's all.
Thank you. Ms. Gutierrez.
Yes, do we report to Waze, the app Waze of transportation?
In fact, Florida Department of Transportation, Miami-Dade Expressway Authority, we provide Waze with the traffic data that they use to
Perfect.
inform the public of the traffic out there.
Ms. Gutierrez, any other questions? Any questions on this side of the board? I do. Kind of follow up to the concerns of the mayor. We obviously have it on the website. We obviously are doing other signage. Are we doing any other type of advertising, for example, in the Herald or in radio? These ramps are going to be closed, and we're giving as much heads up in both Spanish and English to individuals as well?
We send out press releases in advance of any kind of closure. We send out traffic alerts every Friday, and our list of folks who get it includes every traffic reporter and traffic interested party in Miami-Dade County, and they're very good at reporting it. The issue and the reason I put it out here is because this is 836.
Right.
This is not, this is State Road 836. This is the front door to our airport. This is the front door into our downtown. There are going to be closures, and I don't want anybody to be caught off guard. I'd rather them be informed well early.
And are we also providing, I'm sure the answer to this is yes, we're also advertising it or announcing it, let me use the proper term, announcing it in our newsletter that we're providing to our
Yes.
rewards program individual as well, correct?
Yes.
So that goes out to in excess of 50, 60,000 transponder users as well, correct? Okay. Thanks. And will we be doing a presentation on the 836 extension on November 13th before the subcommittee of the county commission?
In June. I
yes.
think the committee, it was supposed to have been held back in May, but because the district commissioner had health issues and the sponsoring commissioner wasn't there, they preferred to defer it out to the June meeting. We've been asked to be there to make a presentation on the process and the alignment and what the project entails right now in the PD&E phase.
If I recall, because I was president at that meeting, we had some associations representing literally thousands of homeowners from West Kendall that were in complete support of it.
Mr. Chairman, there is no question in my mind that there's going to be, if not tens of thousands, it'll be hundreds of thousands of people, because that's how many live west of the Turnpike, that will support a project of this magnitude. There's no question in my mind. Having said that, PD&E is a balancing act.
Of course.
We have to get a project that's permittable, that can be built. And if I cannot get the permits, then it's all for naught. So I have to make sure that we dance the dance, as we say, in every PD&E. And there will be meetings, and what we've encouraged the community is to show up, and they have been showing up in groves, and I applaud them for showing up.
Very good. Thank you for answering all my questions. Any follow-up questions? Yes, Mr. Meyer.
I do have one. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As it relates to the 836 project east of 17th Ave to 95, can you give us an update or status? And with that, if there is no update or status at this point, what our intent is moving forward?
As I've said in the past, that is a project that we jointly funded with the Florida DOT. We are partners with the Florida DOT. It was one award, one contract that the department oversaw and governed the procurement. I participated in the selection committee, and Juan Toledo in the technical advisory committee. An intent to award to the low responsive bidder has been posted. There is, as has been documented in the papers, there is an intent to protest by the second team. There is a process that will be followed. That process will be followed, and it is what it is. I will say, and I've said this publicly, my favorite bridge is the viaduct.
Any other questions?
836 portion actually double decks 836, which resolves a lot of our problems going over the Miami River. So that's the part that I like.
Any other questions, Mr. Meyer? Anyone else? Moving on, council. We are now at general counsel's report.
Yeah, before we move forward, Mayor Jimenez, do you have any conflicts on any items on the agenda?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Well, we do that here in the beginning. I know you're not used to that, but, okay. Now, general counsel's report. First, the ETC litigation. We've had 2 hearings since our last board meeting on ETCC. Both were administrative in nature. The new trial has been set for October 2 through 18 and concludes November 6th through the 20th. Okay.
Of this year?
Yes, sir. The judge was going to move this fast. That's where his comments on the record. Elections. Next month we have our annual election for officers. I'm not a very good prognosticator, but my early prediction is that we will have a new chair, as Mr. Martinez is term limited. So 1 for 1 this year. I just wanted to take a point and say, look, I really respect the board members here. You spend a lot of time here. And as Mr. Payne used to remind me every time I saw him, for free. And as an officer, and as Ms. Spano and Mr. Board will also attest to, that sometimes they come here 3 times a week. So I really respect you, and thank you for your service. Okay. Legislation. I wanted to make a few comments on the legislation. I'll give you a 1-sentence overview because Javier has already spoken a little bit, some about it. The bill has sections that have to do with good governance and the authorities, control over operation, maintenance, finances of the system, and the right, without limitation, to regulate, establish, collect, and receive tolls. As Javier stated, we have briefed almost all board members on our legal position on the effect the legislation has on MDX. As discussed in our briefings, the legislators incorporate exceptions for safety clauses that provide the required protection to our bondholders and other legal obligations. Based on the referenced safety clauses, I believe we can comply with the statute in a manner that does not violate our obligations. Nevertheless, an argument can be made there are parts of the legislation that do impact the authority's governance to set policy for all operational and financial aspects of the authority, which in turn potentially impacts the board's fiduciary responsibilities to our bondholders. By that I mean, while this board has the power at any time to set or change policy based on the procedures established by the board, as it did in 2012, if outside forces mandate those policy changes, it may challenge the independence of the authority, which our bondholders expect under our bond documents. The bond documents require us, MDX, as fiduciaries to comply with our contractual obligations. I do not want any misunderstandings or perceptions from the investment community that MDX is not an independent board. Therefore, I'm requesting, if the legislation becomes law, for authority to take a precautionary step. I'm asking the board's authority to secure an attorney general's opinion concerning the legislation. From the AG's website, issuing legal opinions to governmental agency has long been a function of the Office of the Attorney General. Attorney General opinions serve to provide legal advice on questions of statutory interpretation and can provide guidance to public bodies as an alternative to costly litigation. These opinions are not binding. A request from a board should clearly indicate that the opinion is being sought by a majority of its members, not merely by a dissenting member or faction. I believe this is a prudent course of action to protect MDX board members and our bondholders. If this is a course of action that the board wants to pursue, I would ask that a board member make a motion to give me authority to request an attorney general's opinion concerning the legislation. And if a majority of the members support the motion, I can cite board action in my communication to the attorney general.
Okay. Let's start with it as a discussion item before we get to whether or not someone wishes to move it, if that's acceptable to the rest of the board. So let's start with, does anyone have any questions initially to the general counsel on this issue? This side? Mr. Board.
Is there a specific scope that you would frame the question to the Attorney General? How would you frame it? I mean, because...
Well, I think that our interpretation that we've explained to all the board members is correct. However, I would probably ask them if we are reading or interpreting the first section of the first change, where it says that, I could actually read it on the record if you would like. Notwithstanding any other provisions of law on the contrary, but subject to any contractual requirements contained in the document securing any indebtedness outstanding on July 1st or in any other county defined as 12501. I read that as that's a reference to our bond documents, and the bond documents reference our transfer agreement, which we originally got our rights from FDO, or the state. So our interpretation is that they're protecting, justifiably, because most of the projects are done through bond, they're protecting the bondholders, and that's why that was written in there. But just as a precautionary measure, because I would ask for an Attorney General's opinion.
I think I've heard the chairman say before that, that an attorney always asks the question if he knows what the answer is going to be. So that's why I'm trying to understand how you're going to frame it in terms of, and what solution are you looking for?
Well, I think that if, for example, there's been an interest in our toll rates, and I think that I think we've interpreted this correctly. And by asking the Attorney General if we're interpreting this correctly, you can have your conversation if you want to discuss toll rates, and nobody can perceive that as that you're being mandated, you're being pressured, or there's some kind of outside influence that would affect our toll rates. Because the investment community wants to know that this is an independent agency and you will do what you have to do to protect them. So in other words, I think it's a prudent step because it's, like they said, it's not costly at all, but it also shows that we have an interest in the bondholders, and that if we have a conversation about toll rates, lowering tolls, raising tolls, it's only in the best interest of the agency and not to the detriment of the bondholders.
Now, are you asking that, it seems like you're asking one question as opposed to a series of arguments. And
Yes, that would be correct. I don't think that we've spoken with the executive director about the posting. I think we do everything on the one section that has to deal with board governance. I think we do everything but post our contracts. And Javier said that, the executive director said that he's already ordered that to be done. they'll be scanned and put on there. So really, it has nothing really to do with the board governance issues or the part of the board governance. It has to do more with the authority's control and the right to regulate tolls.
Now, what about the argument that the trust agreement, unilaterally modifying the trust agreement is a different, it's more of a contractual argument than it is in terms of independence and authority?
I agree with you.
To exclude that argument from your...
Not at all, but I don't think the Attorney General's is the forum for that. I think a court of law would be that.
Thank you, Carlos.
And any other questions? Of course, Mr. Mayor.
Maybe you've answered this before, but you're going to, when you ask the opinion, you're going to state what your opinion is, and are you in error or not, or are you just going to ask for an opinion?
No, unfortunately, you have to give your opinion. So if you're wrong twice.
Yeah,
Yes,
because
you have
it's
to give your
open-
opinion.
If it's open-ended, then they may, give you an opinion you may not want.
No, they require that you give your own opinion, and they look at your opinion. But I need, I can't unilaterally do that. I need board approval to ask that opinion.
Okay, I think it's prudent action.
Vice Chair Fano.
Mr. Council, is there a downside to asking the opinion?
No, I don't see any downside.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple. Council, one of the things is that by asking for the opinion, it will provide us with a more in-depth knowledge of what may or may not be the interpretation of the law from an outside source and not from a member of staff. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it would give us some either strengthening the position we feel is the one we have, or it would have us reevaluate our position, which would cause us to redetermine whether or not there is of great legal concern as well, correct?
I agree.
Mr. Director, what is your position on this recommendation from the General Counsel?
I concur with General Counsel in asking the board for that authority. Our legal opinion, which we will distribute to each, I think in the briefings, we shared a lot of it. We will share that with you, and we'll share the question that we're going to ask. It's either an interpretation of the legislation the way we've interpreted, or we're mistaken, and I think that's the critical question. We think we're right.
And just for clarification, Mr. Rodriguez and Counsel, you can both agree, this is an opinion. This would not tie our hands into whatever decision we may want to have. We may disagree with the opinion we receive from the Attorney General and go in a different direction, one way or the other. Is that correct?
No, they're not binding. So in other words, we can't rely on it in the sense that we can't walk into a judge and say, look, we got an opinion from the Attorney General. If someone would bring, there's two ways. If someone brings an action against us, we would defend on what Mr. Board was talking about, but also on this other stuff, on these other arguments. Well, we can also, we can also go to the court, file for a motion and for injunction and ask for declaratory, for them to, the declaration on what that means.
Reality is, regardless of what, at this time, Attorney General Bondi's position is, no court is bound by her opinion if we go for any kind of a hearing. But it will either strengthen our position or make us reevaluate it, which I think is important because it's an outside source. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Hearing none, you've asked for a motion. Does anyone wish to move this item? Vice Chair Fano, seconded by, anyone wish to second it? I need a second. Seconded by Treasurer Board. It's open for discussion. We've had extensive discussion. Does anyone have any other comments or any other questions? No. Hearing none. Carlos, does this need to be a simple majority or two-thirds?
No, just simple majority.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Does anyone want to be recorded as a no? Hearing none, it passed unanimous, Carlos. We've done the TPO report from during your report, correct?
And board members, the committees at the TPO, I forgot to say this in my report, the committees in the TPO are all requesting that we name members to those subcommittees. We haven't because they cleared them all out. We don't have a representative on the MPO yet.
Right.
But if any of you know of citizens that would like to serve on these committees, just contact me. I'll give you the list and see where it matches up so we can present it to the MPO and have these folks appointed to those committees.
Very good. Thank you. Any other information? Moving on, Treasurer's report. Mr. Treasurer.
Well, good afternoon. In my report today, first of all, I'd like to thank staff for all the work regarding next year's budget. I think that the executive director and Maria and myself spent some time reviewing the format of what we wanted to say and how we wanted to say it, and hopefully I'm not going to create false expectations that it's going to change dramatically, but I think that there are some format differences that will be helpful in terms of communicating what we wanted to say. In terms of the results for April, we challenged staff in September, October when we had the hurricane shortfall, and staff came back with recommendations in the first quarter of 2017 that we see the benefit of today. On the positive side, on the revenue side, we are fortunate enough to count with about a $4.5 million positive variance. Most of it is due to the interest that we are receiving that was not budgeted. Nobody forecasted that the interests would change that much, but about 50% of that is coming from that side. On the expense side, we are the beneficiaries of about $1 million in savings from administration, and in total operations, about $1.5 million as of April. Those two items, positive variances both on the expense and on the revenue side, generate a total variance of about $8.1 million, 55% on the revenue side and 45% on the expense side. And that, Mr. Chairman, unless there are any questions, and Marie wants to add some remarks, that concludes my report.
Any questions from the board for our treasurer or for our staff? Hearing none, let's move on. Mr. Director, the committee reports are incorporated into the regular agenda, is that correct?
Yes. And for the next board meeting, presuming that the bylaws item, which is item 8 or 9A, is adopted, the committee reports on the agenda will be removed. We will not list it as an item on the agenda because the agenda will include the results of all the items that come out of the committee.
Excellent. Mr. Counsel, Section 8, consent agenda.
Consent agenda, item A, travel approval, July 14th to the 18th, 2017. Trip to Dallas, Texas by the Executive Director Rodriguez to attend IBTTA Conference Planning Committee meeting and the IBTTA TRB Joint Symposium on Managed Lanes and AET.
Any questions on this item? Moved by Ms. Gutierrez, seconded by Mayor Jimenez. It's open for discussion. Anyone have any questions? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, moving on. The regular agenda, Council. A.
Item A, approval of revisions to MDX amended and restated bylaws endorsed at the Policy and Planning Workshop on May 10th, 2017.
For discussion, I need to have this item moved, please. Moved by Vice Chair Fano, seconded by Ms. Gutierrez. It is now open for discussion. Mr. Counsel, I believe you're going to be presenting on this matter. Please go ahead.
On May 10th, 2017, the MDX Policy and Planning Committee convened an MDX board workshop where board members reviewed and commented on the MDX bylaws. The bylaws were originally changed to reflect the adjustment of board member composition due to 2016 legislation, and staff suggested minor changes that were administrative in nature. I think during the reference workshop, all board members were provided an opportunity to comment on each section of the bylaws, including eliminating, renaming, and realigning responsibilities for the two remaining standing committees. And I would think that was the major revision that we had, and that was just, as I said, eliminating, renaming, and realigning responsibilities for the two standing committees. The revisions are attached. Anybody has any questions?
Well, let's do this the way we did it last time. We'll go through each section, ask if there's a question to that section, and then we'll move on. So we can keep it that way, if that's acceptable.
Yeah, when we get to the proper section.
Great. We have section 5 of 30, the section 1s, where there's the changes are in red. Is that correct, Counsel?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Does any of the board members have a comment to that section or on the portions that have been amended, which is in red? None. Let's move on to Article 2, which there was no changes to, then Article 3. Mr. Walters, please.
On the stricken portion on page 8, where it talks about how a chairman can only be chair 2 consecutive years, it looks like that was put in place in 2010. Is that correct?
That was put in place in 2010.
What was the reasoning for that?
I think that at the time, there was the desire for the chair to move around the board.
Okay, well, you know, over the years, I've observed quite a few different chairmen group. And this agency only functions really well when they have a strong chair. And that might have made sense when it was a 13-member board. But right now, the pool's kind of limited. You know, I know that the mayor and the commissioner are busier than a one-armed wallpaper hanger. The secretary, I don't believe, would be eligible to be chair. I'm a company of one. I don't know how many else of you are like that. I mean, I really don't have, I have a hard time just maintaining being a member without even thinking of all the extra time it takes to be a chair. And I'm wondering if maybe we should go back to the way it used to be and not have a limit?
The desire of the board.
I am not going to say a word. I will let the rest of the board make a discussion. I think the way it is right now is appropriate, at least for this upcoming election. To change it now a month before the election, I think would be inappropriate, especially in any circumstances. If we wish to discuss that after this election for the future, that's a different story. But I would feel very uncomfortable changing it now, myself, personally. It's not a question of whether I am or am not interested. It's more of a question of changing the rules a month before the election could be perceived, if I was either in favor or against it. If I'm against it, it's perceived that I'm not interested in being chair. If I'm in favor, I'm trying to imply that I want it for the third time, and that's not what I want to do. What I have always been is part of this team, and I've always been part of all of us. And I believe we have strong people on this board who could absolutely do a phenomenal job being the chair. So to change that particular situation now, I think at least I will absolutely vote against any changes to it at this point because I think it would be inappropriate. And I don't know if anyone agrees or disagrees with me. Yes. Ms. Gutierrez.
Given that the board size has been reduced to 9, I think this is something that we should all consider. I fully understand that it puts you in a precarious situation because we all look forward to what may be happening next. And I always agree that women chair are fantastic. So, having said that, I do think that we should consider opening it up. And I believe that this board and the individuals here are professional enough and independent enough to vote their conscience and do the right thing. So I do think that consideration should be given to having it open. Why not? Why have limitations?
I guess, is somebody moving to amend the bylaw then, I guess? Are you moving for it to be changed and for the 2-year term to be written? Is anyone doing that? Mr. Walters, are you doing that for discussion?
Well, I just brought it up. And
Okay.
I hear your concerns, and I don't disagree with them, but maybe we should look at it after June.
I personally would feel much more comfortable from sitting in this spot to discuss it in the August meeting. So we can leave that part of the bylaws to be open for review. But today it would be, I think, I feel very uncomfortable having to deal with that, and particularly since it obviously affects me in 30 days. And let's be very clear, I have been extremely pleased and proud of my chairmanship, but I know there are people on this board that have deserved to be to sit in this chair as well. Thank you. So can we, council, can we defer?
You can come back to, like you can approve the bylaws as is and then come back in October, in August and
I think we need
discuss
to
it
move forward with the
again.
rest. That's fine. So let's do it that way. let's move on. We'll leave the language that is, and after, if we wish to revisit this after the elections next month, we could decide in our August meeting. So other than that, Mr. Walters, anything else that you want to discuss? Anybody else?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If I may, because this is, the committee asked to bring this up at the board meeting because it was an outstanding item that you wanted to discuss. And it's in Article 3. And it goes to the chair and the vice chair who serve as ex officio in the committees. And the discussion was, should that remain as ex officios? Now that we have a 9-member board, it makes it very difficult because the chair and the vice chair would would add for quorum, and the board wanted to discuss that. And so I tee it up for your discussion as you requested. Should the chair and the vice chair be ex officio in both committees, or should the chair be appointed to appoint himself to a committee and the vice chair to another? That way there's more than 3 people in a committee, I think was the conversation at the workshop.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Gutierrez.
This opens up, again, the 9-member board, and also what constitutes a minimum at a committee. Okay? So hence, if a chair and a vice chair are ex officio, which means that allows them to vote at any time and be considered as a quorum, I think it should be going back to being a member. So that way, they are appointed to committees, and we know that there is at least a minimum at a committee. Not doing so, what happens is you have 9 members, we all have lives, and sometimes you can't even get here because of things that come up. What happens, you don't want the authority and committees, such important items, being run by 2 or 3. It needs to be a bigger number if we're going to 9. And if we are really of transparency, of accountability, of independence. Should I add any other adjectives?
Pretty good amount for,
Okay, thank you.
Tuesday after Memorial Day weekend. All right, so what are you suggesting then, Ms. Gutierrez, the language be, that they become just members and
That
appoint
they
themselves?
become members, and that committee should be a minimum of 5.
Well, I agree with 100% that the committee should be a minimum of 5. No question about that. The question, though, is, do we want to limit, our vice chair and chair to the fact that they're only, for example, the chair, unless he appoints himself to both committees, would only be a voting member to one of the committee he reappointed to? Or could a chair appoint himself to both committees? Would that be precluded?
No?
I think the conversation was that you would have at least 5 members in each committee, which means 1 board member would have to serve on both committees.
And that could very well-
That I
and
think
that could
was
be
what
the
you
chair.
guys left it at in the conversation.
And in theory, that could be the chair who would be the person who would have to be appointed, the 5th person for each chair. That makes sense. I think that's logical.
Typically, the chair gets the biggest homework and should be attending to all committees.
Attest to that.
So why not?
I agree. I think that actually, could we then maybe change the language to, it is 5 members, 4 to be members of the board and the chair to be the 5th in both committees, so that he is or she required to be the 5th member on both, to make sure, as you said, they got the most homework anyway. There are something to that effect. What do you guys think of that? I think I've attended 90% of our subcommittee meetings in the 2 years I've been on the board, so as chair. Does anyone have an issue with that? I think that's a way to go both ways. The chair is the person who is the 5th on both, and there's 4. That way, 4 will be appointed to 1, 4 will be appointed to 2. Each, the chair doesn't have to force one of the non-members who isn't to be the 5th person. So that's, can we craft some language in that effect?
Absolutely.
I think
So
Mr.
we
Walters.
take out,
Sorry.
Yes, Mr. Walters, I'm sorry, you have something to say, Mr. Walters, I apologize.
No? I think Mr. Walters brought up the issue last time of, if you divided it that way, you're implying that you're not going to have redundancy, that no board member will be in both committees. Mr. Walters brought up a scenario where if you had a lack of attendance, that you might not be able to achieve quorum in one or both of those committees. So I don't know if it's worthy of opening up the discussion again. We already did this for 3 hours,
Right.
3 hours and a half, a month ago. But that was a reasonable scenario. So if in the bylaw, you're implying that it excludes a member from participating in both.
No, it doesn't exclude. What
Okay,
it-
that's fine.
No, no.
That's what I understood, 4
No.
and 4.
Well, and I apologize, what I meant is, as we've all indicated, we all are very busy people, okay? It doesn't seem fair to me that for example, the future chair decides, I'm going to be on X committee, but I'm going to appoint someone else to be on both committees. If they're accepting the responsibility of being the chair, they should be, I think it should be that they are on both committees, and they're the person that has to take up more of their time. But it could be their choice. But it can be their choice, but I think that's the appropriate way it should be. Okay? Anyone have any other questions on that? Okay. Do you know what, did I clarify that, Mr. Rodriguez?
And the number of the minimum.
Can I re-say that?
Minimum has to be 5. I agree with that, too.
Can I state that? I will take out all the language having to do with the chair and the vice chair being ex officio members of the standing committees. And I'll replace that language with, the chair will be a member of both standing committees.
Correct.
Is that okay?
On that. All right. Any other questions on Article 3? Hearing none. Article 4. Comments or concerns about the changes that have been made? Hearing none, let's move forward to Article 5. Article 6. Ms.
With a
Kuchar?
quorum.
Committee
That's
quorum?
where you need to add the minimum.
We need to add,
That's where I made the note.
already made the note. Article 6. 7. And Articles 8 and 9 are relatively small, so Articles 8 and 9 together, does anyone have any concerns? Okay, well, I think it's pretty short. I want to thank staff for its real hard work on redoing these bylaws. I want to thank also the Public Policy Subcommittee that worked really hard. Like you said, we banged these out for a good 2 or 3 hours that day working on this, and that was just a compliment to all of you that we did this. And Vice Chair Fano, you took a really strong work on that, and I want to appreciate and thank you for that very much. So it's been moved, it's been seconded. Any other discussion? Hearing no other discussion, we did have, now Carlos, do we need to vote on the friendly amendment first, or can we do it all simultaneously with the friendly amendment?
You should vote on any amendment first.
Okay. The first one, we need to move to amend now that the chair will be on both committees and the minimum number will be 5. Who would like to move that? Mr. Board, will you move that? Seconded by Ms. Gutierrez. We've had discussion. Discussion is closed. All in favor of that amendment, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. The next item now adding that amendment, we've already moved and seconded the changes to the bylaws. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. The changes to the bylaws have been changed. Thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez, to you and to staff for all your work on this. Item B, please, Council.
Item B, MDX procurement contract number RFP 14-03, MDX work program number 83628.030, design build services for State Road 836 operational capacity interchange improvements, $3,069,169.98. Endorsed by the Operations Committee on May 18, 2017. Approval of supplemental agreement number 2.
Who wishes to move the item? Moved by Ms. Gutierrez, seconded by Mr. Meyer. The item is now open for discussion. Mr. Toledo, I believe you will be presenting on this item for staff.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, board members. This is for supplemental agreement number 2 for the design build contract with Oderberg Construction, Inc. It includes several items, which include safety measures that have been implemented system-wide on the MDX system, as well as items that will be better for the long-term maintenance of the system and 836. But more importantly, what it includes, and it's the bigger item on this essay, is the reconstruction of the inside shoulders as the dedicated express lane and technology lane for the MDX 836 smart lanes. And what it is that we always anticipated that these lanes the express lanes were gonna be part of this project, but originally, prior to the project being awarded, that scope was gonna be done on the outside lanes, which is where you have most of the entrances and exits. In coordination with Miami-Dade Transit, after the award of the contract, it was determined that it would be better to put these lanes on the inside to make sure that we maximize the service of the express lanes. And in doing that, we had to go ahead and do a full reconstruction on those shoulders. This would have been the case of any of the proposers had, regardless of who would have won this contract. So if you have any questions on any of the other specific items, I'll go ahead and answer those. But this is these are all owner requested changes requested of the design build team.
Okay. I will open it up for discussion. Does anyone have any questions? Mr. Mayor, please.
Just want to make sure that these are all requested by MDX. These is not contracted requested changes, right?
These are all owner requested changes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Any other questions? Mr. Walters, yes.
You said that this, in addition to being dedicated bus lane, it's going to be for smart vehicles?
We, as part of the smart lane designation that we did earlier this year, we intend to use the shoulder as the technology lane as well. So we're going to be incorporating everything that we need to do for the future technology piece as part of this project as well.
Well, give me an example.
Well, this would be the lane that we would use for connected and autonomous vehicles. So as that technology evolves, this would be the lane that would be used to pilot or run that program, and then as that program evolves, then we would go ahead and transition that to a full dedicated technology lane.
So you don't see a problem segregating those vehicles? I mean, everyone knows what a bus looks like.
We currently have that on the 874, 878 system, and we take care of the enforcement with signing. As part of this project, we're going to provide enhanced signing, and we're also going to be putting dedicated striping to make sure to signal out that this shoulder could only be used by express bus service or the technology portion. And then we would work with law enforcement to make sure that gets enforced.
So you're basically saying that you anticipate driverless vehicles being look different than a regular car?
We anticipate that we do not want to preclude driverless vehicles from being able to use this technology in the future. We don't know what it's going to look like. I mean, right now we feel that technology.
Struggling with is how do you segregate the vehicles you want on that road from the ones that you don't?
Enforcement would be but we don't.
Yes, hold on. Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
I think you can answer that. I mean, right now, on the managed lanes, if you have a hybrid or electric vehicle, you get a sticker on the back. Same thing could happen for a autonomous vehicle. You can just put a different kind of sticker on the back and you know it's autonomous.
Yeah. Yes, if you have a hybrid, you can actually use the managed lanes without. Yeah. Any other questions on that issue?
One more thing, and yes, one day they will look different.
Now, if you had told me when I first started driving, I cannot tell you how many times, now that the cars are able to parallel park by themselves, how many times I could have saved my father hundreds of dollars in repairs to the scratches I put in my cars between the ages of 16 to 20 to today. Anything else? All right. Any other discussion? Hearing no other discussion, discussion is closed. The item has been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Item C, please, and I believe that will be you, Mr. Toledo, as well.
MDX contract number RFP 14-01, MDX project service title, Road Ranger Service Patrol for the MDX system, $7,500,000, endorsed by the Operations Committee on May 18, 2017. Approval of contract renewal for 3 years.
Anyone wish to move the item? Moved by Ms. Vice Chair Fano, seconded by Mr. Meyer. The item is now open for discussion. Mr. Toledo, please.
Board members, this item is for the 3-year renewal for Ted and Stan's Towing to provide Road Ranger service patrols on the MDX system. At the May 18th meeting, I at the previous operations committee, it was asked that staff go back and discuss any reduction in rates of the current contract rates with the vendor. We went back, we discussed it, and they couldn't provide us any reduction in the current rates. However, in looking at this contract and comparing it to other contracts locally and across the state, we still feel that we're getting the better prices with the services right now, so we are recommending a 3-year renewal at the current rates. We do have our contracts do give us the flexibility to cancel at any time, so if we feel that the market is going in a direction where we can see better rates, we would take advantage of that and go out for reprocurement. But in the meantime, we feel that it is in the best interest of MDX to lock in these rates over this 3-year period. I also want to point out that during the discussion of this item at the Operations Committee, there was a discrepancy in the reporting of the contract cap and the expenditures to date. We realized that we looked at it and we realized that there was a discrepancy in the contract amount, and that had not been updated as a result of the approved budget for fiscal year 17. We went ahead and corrected that administratively, but as a result, we also realized that the amount that we brought in front of the Operations Committee was not in line with the amount that we need for this 3-year extension. So this action item report does reflect the contract cap that would be required for the services for the next 3 years.
Sorry, Mr. Board, let's start with you.
So the last time that we reviewed this item, it was understood that this company has started out with this contract, right? This vendor acquired a lot of equipment to service our needs.
That is correct.
Okay. So that equipment is now amortized. If he bid it correctly, or if I was bidding it, I would amortize the value of the equipment within the first contract period. So the amortization, so that equipment has already been paid for, and that was the basis for us to go back to the vendor and say, you know, a lot of your investment has been recouped. We're providing you an interesting option to renew. And the vendor came back and said, no discount.
Because of the way that these vehicles and the services run, these trucks get run at a higher rate than a regular vehicle. So there is some turnaround of vehicles that they may need to acquire over the next 3 years. And because of that, they came back and said, look, we can't offer you any discounts now because we may have to incur some additional costs for maintenance and maybe turnaround of new vehicles because you can't maintain the fleet that we have now because they've just been, you know, some cars break down more than others. So, you know, we went back, we had this discussion with them, and they couldn't find any relief in the current rate, So
there's no commitment on there's no requirement from them to replace the trucks that are going to be on the road?
No.
No. So we might find ourselves with a contract with a bunch of old trucks on the road. Is there a standard that they need to meet? Because now, as you said, these trucks require significant usage, but there's no requirement for their delivery to be a certain standard. It's not a 2-year truck or it's not a 50,000-mile truck. It can be any truck. So we might be paying for what was new equipment, and there's no requirement for them to replace it. It's just counterintuitive that somebody's getting a renewal with no CapEx and that they can't find room in the contract to lower the price. And they have no commitment to replace the inventory that they have.
No, not at this time. But in looking at how these contracts are being, how these contracts are put together right now across the state, we don't feel that if we went out for a reprocurement at this time, we would be getting better rates. And what we do is incur additional costs. So what we're trying to do right now is make sure that we guarantee ourselves the best rate that's out there. And then again, if we see that the market changes, we do have that opportunity to reprocure at any time.
Any other questions, Mr. Board?
Yeah, I have a question for the secretary.
Yes.
I have a question for the secretary. How do they go about it? What are they doing?
Then the question was?
To you, how are you guys handling the renewal of this particular, because you also have road rangers?
We don't negotiate. We go out fresh with a new advertisement and get a contract. And I wish we got a contract that was at this low rate. It looks attractive to me. As far as the issue of it's the existing contractor, they've got an existing fleet, they ought to be able to do it cheaper. I don't know how they based their original bid. Maybe it had a salvage value at the end. That would be the prudent way to do it. Certainly, when we re-advertise in the incumbent bids, there's no constraint on them to factor that in. And in fact, we often know that adjacent construction contractors have a mobilization advantage over anybody else on the next project. We can't factor that in. Some things are just business advantage.
And if I can only add, even though we don't have a requirement for them to change out their fleet, there is a service level requirement on the contract. So regardless of the vehicle, they have to provide the service. So they do run the risk of whether they continue to maintain a vehicle that just keeps incurring exorbitant maintenance costs rather than replacing a vehicle and maintaining their low cost. And there's disincentives in the contract if they don't perform to the service level required.
That was the original answer.
So Secretary Wolf, then I thought it's important to notice, you were quite impressed with the rate that we're getting on this issue insofar as the
Yes, it's the lowest rate in the region.
I think that's important to know, and that's one I wanted that to be on the record. So it's the lowest rate in the region. Information, Mr. Secretary. Any other questions, Mr. Wolf?
It's actually in the package.
But being in the but again, I never ask a question unless I don't know the answer to. And the package is very important for us, but for the community, having that said is actually very beneficial too. I wouldn't have asked a question, I didn't know the answer. Any other? Mr. Walters.
You know, I see we're increasing it $500,000 a year for 3 years, but when I look at the procurement report on page 2, I can't seem to make the numbers match.
Okay, and I'm sorry I didn't explain that as part of, when we increased the budget in fiscal year 17, it was to account for the additional services that we're going to be adding as a result of taking on the 836, 826 interchange project. When that project was completed, we began patrolling the entire interchange, so we added a vehicle, the wrecker, full-time, 24/7. That's your delta between the original 7 million and now the 7.5, which was the original contract cap versus the contract cap that we're requesting now.
Any other questions? All right, we've had discussion, it's been moved, it's been seconded, discussion is now closed. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, let's move on to the next item, Council.
Item D, approval of comprehensive safety improvement program for State Road 112, endorsed by the Operations Committee on May 18th, 2017.
Anyone wish to move the item? Ms. Gutierrez moves it, seconded by Mr. Ward. The item is now open for discussion. Please, I believe Mr. Toledo, I believe you're also on President for staff on this as well, correct?
Yes.
Please.
So at the Operations Committee of May 18th, staff presented a list of necessary safety and rehabilitation projects for the State Road 112 Expressway. This is, again, one of the oldest expressways on our facility and one of the ones that hasn't received any serious updating or rehabilitation since we've undertaken jurisdiction of the roadway. What I'd like to do is have Albert Sosa go through a more detailed presentation of the improvements that we're proposing, and then we'll answer any questions.
Good evening, Mr. Sosa.
Good afternoon again. Albert Sosa with HNTV, General Engineering Consultant to the Authority. I'd like to begin by just a brief history. Our trust indenture requires that the Authority maintain and operate the system in a safe, efficient, and economical manner, and that we maintain it in sound operating condition and good repair. That's a basic requirement of the trust indenture that we're all responsible for the upkeeping it. A few years back, under then Chairwoman Gutierrez, you challenged us to look at, safety system-wide. And we did it in 2 steps. The first step was, quick, low-hanging fruit. We did the lighted RPMs. We looked at the wrong-way safety program on the ramps that's being deployed. We looked at the enhanced striping. And also as part of that initiative, we took a longer-term look at things, and we began some safety analysis of traffic reports around the entire system. And it's the results of those that are feeding into these analyses. So I want everybody to know that there is a quantitative element to what we're looking at here. It's not just qualitative. In terms of the system as a whole, we'll be coming back next month with additional information on the rest of the system. But just briefly, 874 was recently updated. 836 is currently being updated. 878 and 924 are a little bit newer. So while we foresee there to be some needs on those systems, they're going to be less intense than what we see here on State Road 112. State Road 112 is an older road, and honestly, we just haven't given it as much love as we have the rest of the system. So in terms of general conditions, it was built approximately in 1960, so it's a 1950s design. The bridges are approaching 60 years of age, which is not the end of their useful life, but it's getting to within where you can see the end of their useful life. So we have to consider what we should be doing to these bridges and in what time frame. 12 of the 13 bridges are rated as functionally obsolete, which means that basically when they were designed and built, they didn't meet the standards that we adhere to today, or there's an issue with traffic railings, for example, that they're just not up to current crash standards. The typical section is designed was that of an urban expressway. So you see curb and gutter out there, you see guardrails. These are not things that we would typically design and construct today. So it brings into question the safety that our motorists are seeing on these roadways. Basically, we're entering a window to consider a replacement of the road, updating it, and what we can do to these bridges to bring them up to standard. So we identified several different things. First and foremost, we went through a comprehensive study of the accident reports over the last 5 years. One of the things we found, which is on this slide, was not surprising. The west end of State Road 112, as you approach the airport, it gets congested. In the westbound direction, the ramps back up into the main line, so what you see is a lot of rear-end collisions. About 75% of the accidents in that area, and there's quite a few every year, are rear-end type collisions. So when we had undertaken the strategic plan over the last few years, a couple of the projects we looked at were actually building ramps to fly over Lejeune Road, right, from a congestion relief perspective, but really you start to create capacity and ease the operations through there so those backups onto the main line no longer occur. So those are the first series of projects that we would consider under these, not the first, but in this case, the first in the order of projects we would consider. It's about $226 million for a comprehensive improvement to the ramps, add ramps from westbound 112 directly onto onto Northwest 36th Street, west of Lejeune, and a system of on and off ramps to and from Okeechobee, again, from west of Lejeune. The next project that we looked at, which was a bit of a surprise to me, to be honest with you, we found a large number of accidents were occurring between approximately 17th Avenue and 27th Avenue. And what it is you have a lot of ramps in the area. There's a lot of on and off ramps in that 27th Avenue, 22nd Avenue, 17th Avenue area. So there's a lot of weaving movements, people coming in, people coming off the highway, and it's just creating a lot of friction and a lot of accidents. So that's a relatively simpler project. We think with a series of improvements to those ramps, creating a collector-distributor road system or segregating the ramp traffic from the mainline traffic will go a long way in improving that condition, because it's really, we are just seeing a lot of accidents there. And finally, the third project is more of a comprehensive look at State Road 112. It's improving the typical section to make it modern, to have modern safety standards. And more importantly, or just as important, I would say, is that the existing bridges, not only are they getting older, it's not just a matter of widening them. A lot of them are low compared to normal standards. So while that doesn't create an issue for State Road 112 itself, the cross-traffic underneath, on the arterials underneath, face constraints. Truck traffic is constrained. They can't always use the roads underneath our bridges. And in reviewing the accident, the bridge maintenance reports, we do find that over the years, these bridges are getting hit. You know, it's not a what-if scenario. They are being hit. Several of the beams, outside beams on those bridges, some of them have had to be replaced over the years because they are just low compared to standard. So we run into that decision. Do we invest money in widening these bridges that are getting close to that window of the end of their serviceable life, or do we make the investment now and just bringing them up to standard and getting another 60, 70, 80 years out of these bridges? And that's a larger scale project. It's approximately $250 million. This is an illustration of what the typical section before and after would look like. We're not necessarily adding capacity, right? There's 3 lanes there today. There will be 3 lanes there in the future, but whereas today the shoulders in some cases are 2 foot wide and are not usable, we'd be widening those to 10 foot on the outside and 12 foot on the inside. The 12 foot represents a bit more than standard, right? Standard would be 10. We're going to 12 because we want, if we're gonna make the investment, we should make it to accommodate room for express transit lanes, technology lanes, as Juan was describing before. So we'll be able to accommodate those in that typical section. On this next slide, we lay out a schedule of how we could do this. We have worked with the CFO in terms of what the financing structure, the financial cash flows would look like. We're looking through that. We haven't finalized that yet. I think that's information we'll be coming back to the board with in the coming months as to exactly when these projects would be laid out. There is flexibility in the finance plan, so we think they can be accomplished. The first year and a half, we'd be working on project development on these items, and we think the auxiliary lane project between 27th and 17th Avenue, that weaving condition, we think that's something that we could have a shovel in the ground probably in the next 18 to 24 months and get that underway and get it going. The more major projects, because of the right-of-way required, because of the, some financial constraints and time to get the projects developed, and also having the concept of 836 being under construction at the same time, we would see construction on those in the fiscal year 21-22 timeframe, which would coincide to the wrapping up of State Road 836. And that concludes my presentation.
Before we turn it over back to questions, what basically we wanted to show you with this estimated schedule is that we can get started on this right away. With the approval of this comp plan, we can start this process right away. And like Albert said, we've already identified that one of these projects is something that we can actually expedite with very little project development and trying to get it out on the street as soon as possible. So Albert gave you that window, 12, anywhere between 12 to 24 months, we can have a project on the street to begin these improvements as we work on the other 2 projects that we've identified.
Okay. I open it to the board for questions. Ms. Gutierrez, please.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you, Tonio, for having the presentation ready and the research to back it up. Safety should be our number 1 priority.
Absolutely. No question about that.
One life saved, it's all worth it. Any money that you invest in safety should be number 1.
100%.
The fact that this particular expressway has been left behind and that we haven't done the improvements necessary and has certain areas that are substandard and deficient should be more reason why we need to move on this and move on this now. Again, having an expressway with no shoulders, so now we're going to 12, that means you could actually get off the car and try to fix your own flat tire. Now, if you do have a flat tire, where are you going to put your car? I mean, you have to drive it and figure it out that it is substandard, it needs improvement, it's on the north side of this community, and it should be done now. It should not wait for later. And we have the capacity, so let's plan it and move on it. Again, other things sound more sexy, great access, great roads, but this is a solution that will save a life and improve the quality of life of our community. So I'm very excited and that staff has taken this on and took the challenge of, I want it now, and now it's coming forward. So I really appreciate the effort and the efficiency that they've done so. I look forward to the next steps and how this will roll out and the procurements that will follow. Thank you.
Any other questions? Let's, on this side, Mr. Mayor or Mr. Treasurer Board, no other on this side? Mr. Meyer and then Mr. Walters.
Albert, thank you for that presentation. Just a quick question. Why is the eastbound to westbound the only finish to start relationship between the right-of-way acquisition and design build start?
So
everyone else has floats. I didn't know what the purpose was.
That it's just a coincidence. What we did is we were trying to line up the design build of the eastbound, westbound Okeechobee to start after the westbound to Northwest 36th Street, and then the right, it just worked its way out. It's worked itself out that way.
Mr. Walters?
I'm very excited about the project for the flyover of Lejeune, getting stuck in that traffic a couple of times a week, every week. I remember one of the first projects, I believe, that MDX completed was a similar flyover for Okeechobee off of 112, and the difference that it made was like instantaneous. It really freed up a lot of that road, and now we're getting the same backlog getting off on 36 that we used to get on Okeechobee. My only concern is, do you remember during the strategic plan, the consultant made a presentation about extending 112 all the way to around Perimeter Road and connecting to the viaduct? Would doing this flyover preclude future development like that?
It would
Not at all.
No.
Not at all. That was
Any other questions from the board? Mr. Toledo, we discussed at the subcommittee meetings issues of safety involving other parts of our wonderful, fantastic roadways, and you were very honest. You're like, no chance I'll have it by today's date. Do you think you can have some information on that by the next board meeting in June?
Absolutely, and that's something that I was going to mention now. Per the request of the committee, we will be coming back at the operations committee meeting with a presentation of the other projects that we've identified for 924, 878, and potentially 874. Even though 874 has been updated, there's a few improvements that we've identified there as well. So they're not as extensive as what we have for 112, but we do have projects identified for the remainder of the system, and we'll bring that back in June with the approval items and for committee and board.
Apologize, Ms. Gutierrez corrected me. It needs to go to ops first, and then it will come to the board. But it will. I know we discussed that, Mr. Board.
So Marie, how do we fund this? And the engineers have spoken now.
As always.
Yeah.
The initial project of auxiliary lanes is about $15 million within the next 18 months. Within the work program, there's contingencies, so we'll be able to move that project forward, and the remaining projects will invest in the project development, and then we're just going to have to evaluate the work program on an annual basis to see what we can slide in.
So this calendar here is probably ambitious, or is it a little aggressive, or is more aggressive than what you envision?
You know, when they show me the numbers in the calendar, usually I wait to see what comes out of the project development, because they refine the numbers at that point, and then really they really it usually doesn't look like this one at the end product. But the auxiliary lane project, that is something we did talk about. We can get that into the capital program because of the contingency that's built into the work program, and then we can invest in the project development to evaluate these projects, and they may change after they do the project development.
Any other questions, Mr. Treasurer? Any other questions? Hearing none, discussion is closed. The item is, I'm sorry, Mr. Gutierrez, I apologize. I apologize.
Can't this funding be coming out of the R&R?
That's one of the places we're going to look. Obviously, because it's operational improvements, safety improvements, that's where it would come out of. It would have to. The irony of this project, and this is, I guess, historical, it's one of the first projects I worked on when I was at FDOT in 1995 and 1996 to reconstruct State Road 112 from I-95 to the airport entrance. And the alternative was selected. It was at a public hearing, and for reasons beknownst to everybody in the room, including the community, the project was removed from the long-range transportation plan. Fast forward 20 years, and we're going to be spending probably 4 times the amount that we could have had back in the 96. So this is long overdue, and I've said it. It's just that we had too many other priorities that we were trying to deal with on 836, and now we need to start focusing on 112.
Ms. Gutierrez, anything else? Thank you. Discussion is now closed. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the item passes unanimously. Informational items are in our packets. If anyone has any questions, they can talk to staff about it. Chair's comments, and I'll make this brief today. because I will probably be a little more winded next week. First, next month in my last meeting. First, I'd like to thank all of my, we worked really hard this month in some of the subcommittees and issues such as the bylaws, and I want to thank staff for all its efforts there. I would on a personal note, Mr. Rodriguez, I would like to thank you and staff for keeping me up to date on all of the issues involving the legislation throughout the term that was going on in Tallahassee. But more importantly, I want to thank all of you, here and all staff. I may sit in the center, but we're a team and we're a family in that many ways. I'm going to realize, and it's going to be a little sentimental, that when I first joined this board, I didn't have any kids. And now I have 3. And I'm going to tell.
That means you have too much time in your hands.
Yes. No. But I'm going to tell a funny story. We were at the board, and I believe at the time, Mr. Lasarte, it was my first child. Mr. Lasarte may have been on the chair because I was sitting next to Mr. Gutierrez. The washing machine in my house broke, and my wife was in a race term. So I was sitting next to Ms. Gutierrez, and I said, I gotta go. The water, there's water. The washing machine, the water broke, and I took off. Next thing I know, I'm getting calls from every single member of this board and family member going, "Where are you?" I go, "I'm at Home Depot." Goes, "What are you doing at Home Depot?" I thought the water broke. I go, "No, the washing machine broke." So everybody took time out of their busy schedules to see if everything was okay with my daughter. And Ms. Gutierrez, if I recall, when Annabella was a year or 2 years old, you made her an honorary board member one time when she was here for one of our board meetings as well. So it seems like only yesterday. Thank you all for your hard work, and even though we are constantly under attacks for things that we should not be attacked for, because we do fantastic work, and all your efforts and everything we do, and I will have a lot more to say next month, so stay tuned. Again, this is a preview. Thank you for all of your time. Move to adjourn? Meeting adjourned. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. Be safe on the roads.